She thought she could steal my son's birthday gift and get away with it. She didn't know I'd saved all my receipts and bank statements to win in small claims court. The alarm screamed at 4:45 a.m., a sound that felt less like a wake-up call and more like a daily indictment. For Mark Rojas, the 5 minutes between the alarm and his feet hitting the cold, laminated floor of his one-bedroom apartment were the only time in the day that truly belonged to him. In that silence, he could almost remember the man he used to be. A man who slept past dawn, who dreamed of being a graphic designer, a man whose biggest worry was choosing the right font for a client's logo. That man had died 4 years ago, the same night his wife, Chloe, had been killed by a drunk driver on her way home from her shift at the hospital. The man who rose from that grief was a machine, a vessel with a single purpose: his son, Leo. At 10 years old, Leo was a quiet, observant boy with his mother's thoughtful brown eyes and a resilience that both broke and fortified Mark's heart every single day. Their life was a carefully choreographed ballet of survival. Mark's world was divided into 2 shifts: the 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. grind as a warehouse foreman for a logistics company, and the 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. hustle as a delivery driver for a premium food service. The math was simple, brutal, and absolute. The rent for their modest but clean apartment in a struggling but hopeful neighborhood was $1,200. Utilities, another $200. Food, $400 if he was meticulous and bought in bulk. Leo's after-school program, $150. That left a buffer of about $50 a week for everything else: clothes, school supplies, the occasional movie. There was no room for error, no space for luxury, and certainly no line item for joy. Their sanctuary was this small apartment. It was filled with second-hand furniture, but it was spotless. The walls were adorned with Leo's drawings, vibrant, imaginative scenes of superheroes and space exploration, and a single, beautiful portrait of Chloe that Mark had taken on their honeymoon. This home was their fortress against the chaos of loss and financial precarity. It was a place of rules and routines, of shared chores and quiet dinners, of a love so fierce it was almost tangible. The antagonist in their story wasn't a stranger, it was blood. Mark's younger sister, Diana, lived with their parents 20 minutes away in a slightly better part of town. Where Mark was all tight-lipped responsibility, Diana was a whirlwind of charming chaos. She drifted from one retail job to another, each lasting a few months before she'd quit or be let go for not fitting the company culture, which was Diana speak for chronic lateness and a refusal to follow rules she deemed beneath her. She was a single mother to a boy named Tyler, who was the same age as Leo but possessed none of his cousin's quiet maturity. Tyler was loud, demanding, and had been thoroughly spoiled by Diana and their enabling parents, Frank and Carol. The foundation of the coming betrayal was laid over years of subtle and not-so-subtle slights. Family gatherings were a minefield. Diana would arrive with a new tattoo or the latest smartphone, complaining about being broke, while her son, Tyler, would tear through the house, his arms laden with expensive toys. Leo would sit quietly with a book or a simple puzzle. "Mark, you work too hard," Frank would say, clapping him on the back. "You need to live a little. Look at Diana, she knows how to enjoy life." Carol would chime in, "And Leo is so serious. He should be out playing, getting into trouble like Tyler."
Boys will be boys.
They never saw the exhaustion in Mark's eyes, the careful patching of Leo's jeans, the calculated decision to buy generic cereal. They saw only Mark's stinginess and Leo's shyness, never understanding that these were the necessary traits for their survival. The central conflict began to crystallize around Leo's upcoming 11th birthday. For months, Leo had been talking about the PlayStation 5. He didn't ask for it. He talked about it the way other kids talk about visiting the moon, a beautiful, impossible fantasy. He'd drawn detailed pictures of it, researched the games, but he never once directly asked his father. He understood the math, but Mark had seen the longing in his son's eyes, a look that reminded him so much of Chloe's own quiet hopes. He made a decision. He would get it for him. For 8 months, Mark embarked on a secret, second life of extreme frugality. He skipped his own lunches, packing a single banana and a granola bar from the warehouse break room. He started biking to his second job, saving the gas money. He took on extra cash-in-hand shifts on weekends, moving furniture for a friend's company. He became a ghost of a man. his world shrinking to the space between his two jobs and the growing stash of cash hidden in an old copy of Moby Dick on his shelf. It was $643.17, a number he could feel in his bones. Every dollar was an hour of fatigue, a skipped meal, a moment of silence where he fought back the despair. This console wasn't just a toy. It was a monument to his love, a physical manifestation of every sacrifice he had ever made. The day he walked into the electronics store and laid down the cash was one of the most triumphant of his life. He carried the large, heavy box home as if it were the Holy Grail. He hid it in his closet, the anticipation a bright, warm light in his chest. On the morning of Leo's birthday, he woke his son up and led him to the living room. The look on Leo's face, the shock, the disbelief, the dawning, explosive joy was worth every single missed lunch, every aching muscle, every moment of doubt. "Dad, is that for me?" Leo whispered, his hands trembling as he touched the box. "Happy birthday, son," Mark said, his voice rough with emotion. "You deserve every bit of happiness in the world." For a few glorious hours, the sanctuary was not just a place of safety, but a place of pure, unadulterated joy. They set it up together, their laughter echoing in the small apartment. It was perfect. It was everything Mark had fought for. He had no idea that the very family he had struggled to stay connected to was already plotting to tear it all down. The invitation came 2 days later. It was a text from his mother, Carol. "Family dinner tonight. Diana and Tyler are coming. We haven't seen you and Leo in ages. I'm making your favorite pot roast." The message was a masterclass in passive-aggressive guilt, a skill his mother had perfected. Mark was exhausted. He'd just finished his warehouse shift and had 3 hours before his delivery driving started. The last thing he wanted was to spend it navigating the emotional quagmire of his parents' house. But Leo, still buzzing from his birthday, was excited to see his grandparents and, despite everything, his cousin Tyler. "Can I bring my new controller to show Grandpa?" Leo asked, his eyes shining. Mark hesitated. A voice in his head, the one honed by years of his sister's entitlement, told him to say no. But he didn't want to punish his son for his own cynicism. "Okay," he said, ruffling Leo's hair, "but you're responsible for it. Keep it with you." The dinner was a familiar tableau. His father, Frank, held court, talking about politics. His mother fluttered around, serving Diana first. Tyler was a hurricane of energy, demanding more soda, complaining about the food, and bragging about a new, expensive pair of sneakers Diana had somehow procured for him. Leo sat quietly, occasionally showing his grandfather the controller, explaining the different buttons with patient detail. The escalation began when Tyler's attention zeroed in on the controller. "I want to see that," he demanded, snatching it from Leo's hands. "Hey, be careful with it," Leo said, a note of panic in his voice. "Tyler, share with your cousin," Diana said, her tone implying Leo was the one being difficult. Mark watched, his jaw tightening. He saw the way Diana's eyes lingered on the controller, a calculating glint in them. He saw the way his parents smiled indulgently at Tyler's brattiness. The air in the room felt thick and heavy. The line in the sand was drawn later that evening. Mark was in the kitchen, helping his mother clean up, when Leo came running in, his face pale and distraught. "Dad, it's gone." "My controller. I left it on the couch for 1 minute and it's gone." A cold dread settled in Mark's stomach. He walked into the living room. Tyler was innocently watching TV. Diana was on her phone. "Tyler, did you see Leo's controller?" Mark asked, his voice deceptively calm. "Nope," Tyler said without looking away from the screen. Diana sighed dramatically. Mark, I'm sure it's around here somewhere." "Leo probably just misplaced it. He's always losing things." The accusation so casually delivered was the spark. He didn't misplace it. He had it 5 minutes ago. "Are you calling my son a liar?" Diana snapped, finally looking up. The confrontation erupted in the hallway. The escalation began when Tyler's attention zeroed in on the controller. "I want to see that," he demanded, snatching it from Leo's hands. "Hey, be careful with it," Leo said, a note of panic in his voice. "Tyler, share with your cousin," Diana said, her tone implying Leo was the one being difficult. Mark watched, his jaw tightening. He saw the way Diana's eyes lingered on the controller, a calculating glint in them. He saw the way his parents smiled indulgently at Tyler's brattiness. The air in the room felt thick and heavy. The line in the sand was drawn later that evening. Mark was in the kitchen helping his mother clean up when Leo came running in, his face pale and distraught. Dad, it's gone. My controller. I left it on the couch for 1 minute and it's gone. A cold dread settled in Mark's stomach. He walked into the living room. Tyler was innocently watching TV. Diana was on her phone. Tyler, did you see Leo's controller? Mark asked, his voice deceptively calm. Nope, Tyler said without looking away from the screen. Diana sighed dramatically. Mark, I'm sure it's around here somewhere. Leo probably just misplaced it. He's always losing things. The accusation so casually delivered was the spark. He didn't misplace it. He had it 5 minutes ago. Are you calling my son a liar? Diana snapped, finally looking up. The confrontation erupted in the hallway as they were leaving. Mark, his patience gone, confronted Diana directly. Diana, I know Tyler has it. Just give it back. This isn't a game. Diana's face, usually a mask of placid entitlement, hardened. Why do you always assume the worst of us? You're so paranoid. Maybe you should be more careful with your expensive things if you're so worried about them. It was then that Mark knew. It wasn't just the controller. A horrifying thought crystallized in his mind. He had given Diana a spare key months ago for emergencies. He pushed past her, ignoring his mother's squawk of protest, and ran to his car, Leo scrambling after him. The drive home was a blur of silent panic. He fumbled with the lock, his heart hammering against his ribs. He burst into the apartment and went straight to the entertainment center. The space where the PlayStation had been was empty, just a blank, dusty rectangle on the shelf. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The 8 months of sacrifice, the joy on Leo's face, the sheer back-breaking effort, it had all been stolen, vaporized. Leo stood in the doorway, his small body trembling as he saw the empty space. The look of devastation on his face was a physical blow to Mark. He didn't cry. He just stared, his little shoulders slumping in a silent surrender that was far worse than any tantrum. Mark called Diana, his hand shaking so violently he could barely hold the phone. Where is it, Diana? There was a pause on the other end, then a sigh as if he were a petulant child. Oh, for God's sake, Mark. Tyler was so upset after Leo was bragging about it. He's a child. He doesn't understand why his cousin gets everything, and he gets nothing. I just brought it over here to let him play with it for a few days. It's for family. You need to learn to share. The shift happened in that moment. The hurt, the frustration, the years of being the responsible one while being treated like the villain, it all solidified into a core of ice-cold, absolute resolve. The emotional brother was gone. In his place was a father, a protector, a force of nature. She didn't see it as theft. She saw it as redistribution. Her sense of entitlement was a moral black hole that had just consumed his son's happiness. He wasn't dealing with a misunderstanding. He was dealing with a pathological worldview. It's not sharing when you steal, Diana, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. You have until tomorrow morning to return it, unharmed, or you will face consequences you cannot even imagine. He hung up before she could respond. He looked at Leo, who was now silently crying, wiping his tears on his sleeve. Mark knelt down and pulled him into a tight hug. I'm so sorry, buddy, he whispered into his son's hair. Is Aunt Diana a thief, Dad? Leo asked, his voice small and broken. The simplicity of the question cut through all the family complexity. Yes, Leo, Mark said, his own voice breaking. She is, and we're going to get your birthday present back. The awakening was not a sudden epiphany, but a grim, methodical process that began that night after he had finally managed to get a heartbroken Leo to sleep. The apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt violated. The empty space on the shelf was an accusation. Mark sat at his small kitchen table, a notepad and a pen before him. He was no longer just a tired father. He was a general preparing for war, and the battlefield was his own family. His first call the next morning was to the non-emergency line of the local police department. The officer who took his report was polite but skeptical. So, your sister, who you gave a key to, took a game console from your apartment. The officer summarized. She stole it, Mark corrected, his voice firm. She entered my home without permission and took property that does not belong to her. I have the receipt. I want to file a formal report for burglary. The officer tried to dissuade him. Sir, these family matters, they can get messy. Are you sure you don't want to try to work this out? I am sure, Mark said. I am creating a paper trail. The act of filing the official report was the first brick in his fortress. It was a declaration that he was no longer playing by the unwritten, twisted rules of his family. He was invoking the actual law. The backlash was immediate and vicious. His phone began to blow up before he even left the police station. It was his father. "What the hell is wrong with you, Mark?" Frank roared. "You called the cops on your own sister? Over a toy?" "It's not a toy, Dad. It's $650 of my hard-earned money that she stole from my son's birthday." "She didn't steal it. She borrowed it." "You're being dramatic. You're tearing this family apart because you're selfish. You've always been selfish. You need to drop these charges right now and apologize to your sister." Mark listened to the tirade, his hand clenched around the phone. He didn't interrupt. He let his father exhaust himself. When the line fell silent, Mark spoke, his voice calm and lethally quiet. "No, Dad, I will not. The only person who owes an apology is Diana, and she will be returning the PlayStation, or she will be dealing with the consequences. My loyalty is to my son, not to a thief who happens to share my DNA." He hung up. The act felt both terrifying and liberating. His mother called next, her voice a waterfall of tears and manipulation. "Mark, please, for me. She's your only sister." Tyler was so sad. "Can't you just let this go? For family?" "Leo is my family, Mom," he replied, his heart feeling like a stone in his chest. "He's my only priority. The console will be returned, or I will see Diana in court." He could hear the shock on the other end of the line. He had never stood up to them like this. He had always been the compliant one, the one who smoothed things over. No more. The gathering of evidence was his next step. He went to the bank and got a printed statement showing the cash withdrawals that corresponded with his savings. He dug out the receipt from the electronics store, pristine and damning. He printed out a copy of the police report. He then sent a formal certified letter to Diana's address, demanding the return of the property within 48 hours, or he would file a lawsuit in small claims court. He kept a copy of the mailing receipt. He was building a case, brick by immutable brick. His allies were few, but they were powerful. His only real confidant was his best friend, Ben, who had been his rock since Chloe's death. Ben, a paralegal, helped him draft the small claims court paperwork. "You're doing the right thing, man," Ben said, his voice firm. "This isn't about a PlayStation. This is about teaching your son that he matters, that his feelings are valid, and that no one has the right to walk all over him." The emotional toll was immense. The constant barrage of texts and calls from aunts, uncles, and cousins, all parroting his parents' narrative that he was a selfish, vindictive monster, was exhausting. Leo started coming home from school quiet and withdrawn. When Mark pressed him, the story came out in a tearful rush. Tyler had been bragging to his whole class that he had Leo's new PlayStation, that his uncle had given it to him because Leo didn't deserve it. The other kids, smelling blood in the water, had started teasing Leo, calling him poor, saying his dad was a loser. The betrayal had now seeped into his son's school life, poisoning his one refuge outside of their home. Mark felt a rage so pure and cold it scared him. He held his sobbing son, promising him it would be okay, all the while knowing that the only way to make it okay was to see this through to the very end, no matter the cost. The strategic awakening was complete. He was no longer just fighting for a piece of plastic and silicon. He was fighting for his son's dignity, for the very principle of justice, and for the right to define their own lives, free from the toxic The judge was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with a brisk demeanor. She called the case, Mark Rojas versus Diana Miller. Mark stood and presented his case with the calm, methodical precision of a man who had rehearsed this moment in his head 100 times. He laid out his evidence, the receipt, the bank statements, the police report, the copy of the certified letter. He explained, without embellishment, how he had saved for 8 months, how the console was a birthday gift for his son, and how the defendant had entered his home without permission and taken it. When it was Diana's turn, her defense was a masterpiece of narcissistic logic. "Your Honor, this is a ridiculous misunderstanding," she began, her voice dripping with condescension. "I was just borrowing it for my son. My nephew was being selfish and wouldn't share. I was trying to teach him a lesson about family."
"We're family?"
"We share things. My brother has always been possessive and greedy. He's using this to punish me because he's jealous of the relationship I have with our parents." The judge listened, her expression unreadable. She then turned to Frank and Carol. "And you two are here because?" Frank stood up, puffing out his chest. "Your Honor, we're here to support our daughter. Our son is out of control. He's destroying this family over a video game." "It's shameful," Carol added, weeping softly into a tissue. "We just want our children to get along." Mark is being so cruel." The judge looked from them back to Mark, then to Diana. The silence in the room was absolute. "Ms. Miller?" the judge said, her voice cutting through the drama like a scalpel. "Do you have a key to your brother's residence?" "Well, yes, but did you ask for his permission to enter his home and remove his property?" "It wasn't like that. It was for family." "That is not an answer to my question," the judge interrupted. "The law does not recognize a family borrowing exception to burglary or larceny. You took property that did not belong to you, without permission, from a secured dwelling. That is theft. Your motivations and your parents' opinions on family dynamics are irrelevant." She then turned her gaze to Frank and Carol. "And you," she said, her tone icy. "By supporting your daughter's criminal behavior and vilifying your son for seeking to protect his child and his property, you are not preserving your family. You are enabling its destruction. Your son has presented clear factual evidence. Your daughter has presented excuses." The collapse of Diana's world was visible in real time. Her defiant mask crumbled into one of shocked panic. The judge ruled immediately, judgment for the plaintiff. Diana was ordered to return the PlayStation immediately and to pay Mark the full value of $650, plus court costs. The aftermath was a hollow victory. Diana, sobbing with rage, handed over the console in the courthouse hallway. It was shoved back into its box, but the corner was cracked, and the controller that had been Leo's pride and joy was scratched, with a sticky residue all over it as if it had been coated in soda and never cleaned. The physical damage was a perfect metaphor for the emotional devastation. That evening, Mark looked at the damaged console, then at his son. He couldn't give this to Leo. The object was now tainted, a symbol of betrayal and family ugliness. Leo.